The views, comments, stories, and opinions shared within this podcast are my own or those of my guests, and in no way represent the views of the company or companies that I or we work for. All stories, events, and tales shared within this episode may or may not have happened in the manner in which they are told. They may or may not have even happened at all. The details have been changed to protect the innocent and the guilty alike. This is Squawk Ident.
You're listening to Squawk Ident, an aviation podcast dedicated to the journey and the challenges surrounding the life and career of Aviator Tony, his co-hosts, and his guests. Together, we will explore the many pathways to an aviation profession, the realities of what a professional aviator can expect in today's marketplace, and we share many stories along the way. I'm your host, Aviator Tony, an airline pilot currently flying for a Legacy airline with close to 20 years on the flight line. This is episode 39 of Squawk Ident, recorded on the 21st of April, 2020, from the Aviator Sound Studios somewhere in Southern California. On this episode of Squawk Ident, I am so very honored to be joined by a fantastic gentleman who has had an amazing journey in aviation and in life. From his start in the U.S. Navy to excelling within the ranks at Legacy Airlines by maintaining positions in reservations, ramp services, customer service, gate agent, flight attendant, pilot, Aeromedical and HIMS Chairman, peer monitoring, and as a board member of the Something MAAgic Foundation. Today's guest exemplifies the term giving back to his community. His story is filled with tenacity and growth and determination. You are going to want to hear more about his journey by the end of this episode, and you'll get the chance. His journey with Legacy Airlines will soon be featured in an issue of American Way magazine. So whether you are working from home in your respective fortresses of isolation, taking a break from binge-watching your favorite Netflix, Prime, or Hulu shows, or out there in public doing your essential part, sit back, relax, and enjoy the show. Right after a brief word from our sponsors. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the show. I would like to start off today by taking a moment to recognize all of the frontline professionals out there, the medical staff across the U.S. and around the world that continue to sacrifice their personal safety and well-being in order to care for our friends, our families, and our neighbors, often without hesitation or a second thought. Thank you for all that you do from all of us here at Squawk Ident. And let's get started. This is episode 39 of Squawk Ident. Today, I am very thrilled to welcome to the show an absolutely exceptional individual that I met many years ago while flying the line at an airline that we here on the show called Sandpiper Regional. Though our journeys allowed for us to fly only one sequence together, I knew halfway through that trip that he was a person that I wanted to keep in touch with. I saw something in his character that told me that without question, he would go very far in both the aviation industry and on his journey in life as well. His story is filled with over 3 decades of consistent examples of determination, tenacity, and difficult challenges that he has had to overcome. He is currently an Airbus pilot for a carrier that we here on the show call Legacy Airlines. I am very honored that he has agreed to speak with us today. All the way from his beautiful home in Miami, Florida, please help me in welcoming to Squawk Ident, Mr. Owen Cotto. Owen, how the heck are you?
Fantastic. Here quarantined in my house, having a good time.
Yeah.
Running around the house.
Yeah, and how are you doing
just
handling with this current situation? I mean, it's pretty stressful for everyone, not just pilots.
You know, it is what it is. I mean, we have to make the best of it. There's nothing that we can do to control it, right? So it's going to be what it's going to be. What's going to happen is going to happen, and what's next is next. And I don't feel stressed out actually. I'm just like going with the flow, honestly, having
Yeah.
a good time and enjoying the best I can with my time off.
And that's really all we can do, right?
Yeah, it's all we can do. I mean, not to stress out over it.
Yeah.
I refuse to. I used to, but I not now.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that's really the
Yeah,
smartest way because why put all that stress on the body and on the mind? Our
right,
jobs are
right.
difficult enough. A lot of people make fun of the airline pilot and how, oh, what do? You push the takeoff, cruise, and land buttons. How hard can that be? But truth is, there's a lot of readiness that we have to have as pilots behind the
Especially
controls.
getting up in the morning.
Yeah, that's the hardest part. Remembering what day it is.
Yeah.
Well, I want to say thank you again for sitting down with us here on Squawk Ident. I really do appreciate you agreeing for this. And I would like to take a moment to just remind our listeners what Squawk Ident is really all about. I created Squawk Ident to explore the unique journeys and challenges that many of today's aviators have experienced along the way. With that in mind, I cannot think of anyone that could better exemplify how wonderfully rewarding and challenging a career in aviation can be than yourself. Owen, take us back to your younger days. Growing up in New Britain, Connecticut, what was that like for you?
New Britain was a great place to grow up. It was a small town. A lot of factories that were employed a lot of people in this town, and it was a family-oriented town. People knew everyone. The kids who I grew up with from kindergarten. We all went through elementary, middle school, and high school together. Um, and it was just a really good place to grow up. There were parades, there were festivals. There was a Polish festival, there was an Italian festival, and a Puerto Rican festival. It was just a melting pot of a lot of different countries from around the world who settled in New Britain, the central city in the state of Connecticut. Just a great place, great place.
Yeah, so it sounds like it wasn't a very large city. Do you know any of the stats, like how many people was the population of New Britain?
I don't know what the population is now because I've been out of New Britain for over 23 years. But back then, I would say it would be about 40 or 50,000, and that's actually a small number for a town.
Yeah,
It's not that small anymore, but back then I would say that the population would be about 40 or 50,000.
yeah. And how did you like roll this into kind of an interest in aviation? Was this something that started because usually it starts at around the tender age of 5, 6, 7 years old. Is it very similar to your situation?
Let me see if I can remember back then because that was like yesterday. But um, you know, um, when I was a kid, I always had a passion for airplanes. My mother took a photo when we were coming from Puerto Rico one summer, and I was in the front of a 707 back in the late 70s. And it's something that I thought I always wanted to do, but never thought I could do it or afford it.
Yeah.
Sometimes we set these roadblocks in our path, and when we get older, we realize they were just roadblocks. It was a different generation, and I think that the kids today probably don't have the roadblocks that I think we did. I knew someday I would probably get into aviation. I just wasn't sure if it was going to be aviation or law, which they're two different professions. But I
Yeah.
knew one of those professions would be the professions that I would be involved with.
So you knew this kind of at a young age. What drew you to the law degree? Was someone else in the family in law as well?
Nobody. I was the first of a lot of many things, even getting in trouble. But no, I just wanted to do something different. I thought that growing up in central Connecticut was a great place to grow up. However, there was not much to do there in regards to as you got older.
Mm,
It's great for a kid to grow up there, but it wasn't a city that I wanted to live and spend the rest of my life.
yeah.
And I felt that these were two careers that these two careers were a way to get out.
And was this kind
That's
of
what
like
I felt.
towards the high school age that you started feeling this way?
I would say I started feeling this way probably around the seventh grade,
Oh wow, that's
seventh and
pretty.
eighth grade.
Yeah.
I was pretty advanced. My parents always said that I was much more mature for my age, and that I was probably ready to move out on my own when I was 14,
Yeah.
13, 14 years old. Yeah, they always say I was way beyond my years.
Yeah. So here you were, kind of looking at law on one side, aviation on the other. And, was that what kind of pushed you towards looking at the U.S. Navy for an opportunity there?
Yes, I wasn't sure what school I wanted to go to. Very good. What school I wanted to go to. So I also needed assistance with paying for college. I didn't want my parents to have to burden the for them to pay for that, take the expense. I didn't want to put the burden on them. And so anyway, the military. I was able to get the assistance from the military to go to college, and military was something that I always wanted to do. I always thought I was going to end up in the Air Force, not the Navy.
Mm.
But I chose the Navy because I thought that once I finished school, I would probably go back, become an officer, or halfway through college, become an officer that I can get possibly into a flight program. Um, I did 6 years in the reserves. However, I did not go active duty. I decided not to go that route.
Oh, I see. And
I
was
should have.
this where was this
I,
that you did your time?
I did my boot camp training in San Diego, California. It was called RTC NTC, Recruit Training Command, a Naval Training Center, and that boot camp is no longer there. Back in the early 90s, I believe it was, when they were getting rid of or downsizing the military, the Navy had three boot camps. The other one was in Orlando, Florida, and the one in Great Lakes, which we call
Mhm.
Great Mistakes. And
Yeah.
that was the only one that's open right now. When I did my apprenticeship training in San Diego as well as my A school, and then I returned back to Connecticut since it was reserves. It was one weekend a month and 2 weeks out of the year, and I was stationed briefly those weekends and those 2 weeks on a frigate ship. It was called the USS Clark, and sometimes the ship would leave out of Providence, Rhode Island, or Mayport, Florida.
Mhm.
And when it did leave out of Mayport, Florida, what we had to do is our reserve station, which was based out of Plainville, Connecticut, which was a city very close to where I grew up, New Britain. We would drive to Newport, Rhode Island, and then we would get on the ship and get on the ship down to Mayport, and then we take a military hop back to
Oh,
Providence. And
yeah.
that would work vice versa sometimes.
So, and you were relatively young. You were fresh out of high school when you enlisted, right? And then you were
I was
going
18
to,
years old.
yeah, 18 years old. And when did you start at, you went to was it a community college at first? And did you do all your
Yep.
GA stuff
I,
there?
I very good. Yeah. I general aviation. I didn't become like general studies or yeah. You mean your GS?
Yeah,
Yeah. I
like
went
that's
to
what I
community
did. I went
college.
to
Yeah.
community college and did my general education studies there, and then English, math, all that kind of stuff. And then I transferred into San Francisco State, and I know you did a very similar path, right?
I did. I did. I went to Texas Community College, which is a community college. It's called. I think it has a different name now. But I went there for the first 2 years. I got a lot of the general electives that I needed to transfer into Central Connecticut State University, which is the college or the university that is in the city that I grew up in New Britain.
Yeah. And Central Connecticut, what was your field of study there?
I have a business degree that I don't feel I've ever used, but however, it looks like I have used it in everyday life. I guess with finances as well as with back in I want to say the late 90s. I bought some real estate in Miami, so I could say that I used it. I used my degree
Yeah.
for
Yeah, and I
that.
know you kind of were toying with the fact that you might kind of ditch the law and the flying and become a real estate investor for a short period of time. When you bought that property in Miami, um,
Yeah,
and that kind of
good memory.
how did that transition kind of pan out to where you ended up deciding to go work? What you told me, reservations? Is that how it worked?
Well, I was still living in Connecticut when I was in college, and I was still in the Naval Reserves. I was working at a bank actually part time while I was in school, and one of the Legacy Airlines Reservations representatives kept cashing her check, and I asked her what that was, and she said it was an airline. I said, yes, I had no idea. Legacy had a res office in Connecticut. I had no idea. Um, and I told her that, someday I'd like to see the world. And when I was a kid, I always thought about becoming a pilot. I just didn't think that I could do it. Um, So anyway, she gave me the information, and I'm actually still friends with her on Facebook. Her name is Denise, and she gave me a referral, and I had an interview at the Hartford Res office, and I was hired there as a call center rep. I
So
actually
you're,
went with a good friend of mine
yeah.
who wanted the job, and I got the job.
And you
She
ended up
did
with the
not.
job. Of course, that's the way it always works, right?
Yeah, she really wanted the job. At Legacy Airline, I got hired in reservations, so I was going to school. So that was another way to, contribute to my schooling as well. Um, they were hiring for part-time reservations agents as well as full-time reservations agents.
Mm.
You had a lot of flexibility. You could get rid of what we call with CS. People can pick up your shifts. You can trade your shifts around. I mostly worked on weekends since I was junior at Legacy Airlines.
Mhm.
So, I got the job. I had gotten some information on future potential opportunities within the airline once I finished school. I actually was there for 2 years,
Yeah.
and that's where my career started.
So let
And
me get this
while I
straight.
wasn't,
You're
Mhm.
full-time at a state university. You are
Yeah,
Navy Reserves. You were working at a
yeah,
bank. You
yeah,
met someone that got you a reservations job for Legacy Airlines. You're
yeah.
19 years old at the time. Was that right?
19, 20 years, 20 years old.
20
Yeah,
years old. And you're
yeah.
doing like four
Well,
major
now I'm
things.
20 because yeah.
Yeah,
I was busy. It kept me out of trouble.
I hear you, man. I hear you. I did the
It kept
same
me
damn
out of
thing.
trouble.
Get you out of trouble when you're at that tender age of 20, 21, 22, and you know that you can get in a lot of trouble. So, 2, 3, 4 jobs. But my hat's off to you. That's because those aren't, flipping burgers. Not that there's anything wrong with flipping burgers down the street, but these are pretty, intense jobs that most people would say, "Hey, that's a wonderful job. Each one could have turned into a career." So,
Well, it's interesting you say that. Yeah, it's interesting you say that with the banking because I did the banking for a year and a half, and I never thought that I was going to go into banking anyway. I chose a business degree because I wasn't sure what degree I was going to go in, honestly.
hmm,
And I did that for a year and a half. And it was a part-time job. It was just something to do while I was going to school to help supplement.
yeah.
I was still living. I went, when I left boot camp and A school and apprenticeship training, I went back to live at home. I
Mhm.
didn't live on campus. I didn't have the experience of living on campus. However, I don't regret it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, I
And that
don't
time,
regret it.
that time that you don't have to deal with a lot of the bull crap that, you have to deal with on a college campus and the socialization and the trouble that you can get into. I mean, I hear you. I hear you.
I was busy.
You were busy. I
I,
mean,
you know,
come on, you're
yeah, I
still
was busy.
busy. You're
I
still
was.
busy. Come on.
Yeah, absolutely. It keeps you out of trouble.
It
It
does.
doesn't matter how old you are, whether you're 20 plus 30, right?
Right.
19 plus 30.
Right.
You have to. I think it's important to stay busy to keep yourself out of trouble
Yeah.
and out of Brazil.
So you did the reservations, you said, for a couple years. And you completed college, right? Around the same
Mhm.
time.
Yep.
You graduated
Around
from
the same time.
college. You're still doing the Naval Reserves.
Mhm.
Did your time there, and that turned into what? A transfer?
Well, what I did was when I was in reservations, the summer of 1992, there were $199 fares back then cross country. The airlines were having this amazing fare, and the airports needed help. So they went to the reservations offices to see if anyone would volunteer at the airport. So for the summer of '92, I went to San Francisco, and I
Ah,
worked in San Francisco for the summer as a passenger service agent, where I assisted at the airport. I assisted the gate agents as well as the ticket agents at the gate.
yeah.
Then
Yeah, I
once,
remember you were living
Mhm.
in my neck of the woods there for a while. We talked about that when we flew
Yeah,
together. We're like, you were there in
yeah, yeah,
'92, and so
yeah,
yeah,
yeah. Mind you, I was in the Navy 2 years already before I started Legacy Airlines
yeah.
because I didn't start until July of
hmm
'91.
And so, and you were in the Navy until 1995. So here you were, juggling your reserve time on the weekends and still working at this point full time for Legacy Airlines, and you were no longer working for the bank, right?
Well, let me tell you the way the Legacy. I did say it again, didn't I?
I don't know if you did.
Legacy.
Legacy's fine,
Damn.
or our sister company.
Yeah,
Either
so
way.
Legacy, our sister Legacy Airlines. So 6-year reserves with a commitment. Okay, I did 4 years, and then the last 2 years they can call you if they need you. But your full commitment could be up to 8 years back then in 1989. I don't know what it is today, but if there was a war, they could call you up to 8 years.
Oh,
I
okay.
don't know if you know how that works.
Now,
Yeah.
my wife
Yeah.
could tell you she did the Army enlisted and Army reserves as well. So
If I
around
had
the
to do
same
it
time.
again, I would have stayed in.
Yeah.
So she was Desert Storm. She's got the little red and yellow ribbon.
Yeah.
Desert Storm.
Yeah. Yeah. So you went to San Francisco. You traveled. You did your time over there as a passenger service agent, and now you kind of got your feet wet in a different aspect of the industry of the company. You know, do you remember any of the biggest challenges that you had during that time frame?
In San Francisco, I think it was the first time that I was away from home and I had to get like my own place to live. And at 22 years old, getting a place to live and sharing a place with roommates. Although it was only going to be for summer, that was a challenge for me because it was something new. It's different when you're in the military and you go to boot camp, you have everything there. While I was in college, I was living at my parents' house. So this is like kind of the first time that I left home and, I had a roommate for the summer and I had to cook my own food. I can do what I want to do. I mean, I could do what I want to do prior, but I mean, it was interesting,
Yeah.
especially in a city like San Francisco. I don't feel like back then, if I had to do it over again, like I saw more of that part of the area because I came home a couple times on the weekend and a couple of those weekends. So if I had to do it over again, I would want to have learned more about the Bay Area.
Yeah. Yeah. It's a
But I learned
beautiful.
enough about
It really is a beautiful city. Different than when I grew up there. I was there in the late '80s, early '90s. Graduated from San Francisco State, and I think it was '98. And it was a wonderful time. I was renting a house 2 blocks from campus with a couple roommates. Something that financially would be absolutely impossible for 3 students to do nowadays. But it was a wonderful time, and it's not the same. Unfortunately, it's not the same as it was. But it's still a beautiful city, and yeah, I even regret growing up there not exploring more, and I explored quite a bit as a amateur photographer and a school photographer. Uh, you know, I got out there, but still, there's just so much to that city, so much history there. It's wonderful.
And
But
you know
your
where I
time,
lived? I lived in San Mateo.
yeah, yeah, and
lived
I
in
was in
San
San
Mateo.
Bruno. I was in San Bruno,
That's
right down the street, really,
next door.
basically.
I should have lived
Yeah.
like in the heart of San Francisco. That's where I should have lived.
Well, yeah. But even back then, it was kind of crazy prices, So when you finished up your summer program in San Francisco, is that when you went back to Connecticut, or is that the time where you
Okay.
went?
Well, when I finished the summer in San Mateo, San Francisco, I went back to Connecticut because I had another year to finish school.
Mm-hmm.
And while that I was going through that year, I made a decision that I was going to probably work at an airport because I really enjoyed the experience at SFO with the Legacy Airlines.
Yeah.
And I left in June of I believe it was '93, was it, to Chicago. And
The Windy City.
I worked in the Windy City. Yeah, another place where I had to get my own apartment with a roommate.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, June of 1993, and I was a gate agent there. And while I was in Chicago, I experienced the flight attendant strike,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
and not the legacy carrier, but the sister company
At the regional partner?
at the regional partner.
Yeah,
the
so we
sister
call them
company
Sandpiper Regional here. It's a little homage to the old Wings TV program there. Sandpiper Regional. Yeah, I remember that time. It was before my time. I got hired on a little bit after that, but yeah, for sure.
Well, October 31st, 1993. Does that ring a bell? That was the day that the ATR crashed.
Yes,
and I was in Chicago.
Roseland. Yeah.
Yeah, Roseland.
When you take an airplane
that
that's built in the jungle with icing boots instead of de-icing heated leading edge devices and you inflate those boots too often in a area like Chicago, where the icing is treacherous to say the least, disaster is inevitable. And unfortunately, we lost an aircraft at our old regional airline that we worked for, and a little bit before my time. But you were there, you lived it. A lot of people, lost a friend from that Roselawn crash, and immediately the parent company took all those ATRs and sent them down to a place
Yes.
where de-icing was not even on the radar, like Miami, Florida.
Miami and San Juan,
And
Puerto
San Juan,
Rico.
that's right.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. So it was interesting.
is that something that kind of was the first thing that kind of sparked your interest with the pilot side of things, when you started seeing, hey, I can go fly in Puerto Rico and be around family or whatnot? I mean, is that something that was even on your mind, or just not at that point
Not
yet?
even yet. You know, and I should have mentioned this. When I was in reservations,
Mhm.
I had spoken to one of my supervisors who happens to work in people services now. He's a high level VP over there, Mike Waldron. And I basically told him that I was probably going to get involved in management.
Mm,
And some of the reasons, some of the ideas he had for me is you need to move around the company, because higher level management at American Airlines loves when you've diversified yourself into different departments.
absolutely.
And then him knowing that I was going to get a business degree, that even made it even more of a, very good for me, for my
Yeah.
resume. Yeah, he's still here. He's in Dallas. He's one of the head guys for, I want to say it's people service,
Yeah.
Mike Waldron.
So
Yeah.
is this really kind of was it his suggestions to you to kind of place yourself strategically in these departments for the end game? Is that really something that really drove you between your education and your positions in the different sectors of the company? Is this really what drove you at that time?
That's a great way to phrase it. I was very driven, and I was passionate, very passionate. I still am, with anything that I do. And back then, I didn't just see myself, and not that there's anything wrong with it, as a call center rep. I knew that I needed to move around. Um,
Sure.
and I did take his advice to heart. I did. Um, Especially when I went to go work in San Francisco for the summer at the Legacy Airline. I really enjoyed that. When I returned back, like I said, and back to reservations, and then after being in reservations for another year or less than a year, and I went to Chicago, I saw a different side of the operation, because back then every station was a little different.
Yeah.
The Legacy Airline was run very different. And as you know, the sister partner, or Ozark, or the regional, was also run very, very different. There were several of them back then. So
Hmm.
there was a lot of moving parts within the airline, and there was a lot that we could learn from.
Yeah.
Um, while I came back on that year, the Legacy Airline has several programs, and they were called Walk a Mile. Are you familiar with the Walk a Mile program?
I've heard about those. Yeah. Where you go into the different
They push,
departments and whatnot.
right. Well, you go into different departments. You're able to work in a department for a day or 2 days, a week. It is on your day off.
Hmm.
So I did a couple walk miles as well while I was in reservations in San Juan, Puerto Rico on the round, and I did it with two other reservations agents twice. So we were able to see the operation in San Juan, and how the ramp worked, and all the moving parts with the ramp. Um, I knew that the ramp was not where I wanted to end up, but I did want to know how the whole system worked, especially with the transfer bags, um, within the regional or the sister company as well, how they move things around. So I found that to be pretty interesting as well.
Yeah.
Um, yeah.
So you've really
Although I
worked in
knew that
every you've worked in every really every base at one point or another, between San Francisco and reservations in Connecticut, and you even did time in JFK and Miami, and I mean, is there
yeah,
anywhere you didn't
JFK
work?
was there. Yeah, San Juan. No, I didn't work there full time, but
But you were
I
there,
worked everywhere actually.
Yeah.
I was there, yeah.
Yeah.
I did. I tell you, I was on a mission, and it was, what that manager said to me was, I took it to heart. I said, if you want to move up within this company, within this airline, if you move around the different departments, it makes you really marketable.
Yeah.
And back then, that old Legacy Airline was very big on promoting their own, especially when they had experience. The individual had experiences from different departments.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, the time that I spent in Chicago, um, after that crash, and then before that was the flight attendant strike. The flight attendant strike, in November.
Hmm. I've
There were
heard of it,
changes made.
Yeah.
Right. It was a very, very bad strike. I was also a gate agent in Chicago, and there was a lot of divisiveness that happened around this time.
Oh yeah, it was one of the ugliest strikes I've
And
ever read about, between managers
oh
trying to
yeah, it was
become flight
bad.
attendants when they weren't
They were
even
calling the
certified,
10-day
and
wonders. 10
yeah,
days.
10 days
They were
to
called
get
the 10-day
certified
wonders.
and go. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, that
Yeah,
was
they were
not
called
good.
the 10-day wonders. Yeah. Well,
Yeah.
it's interesting because they had in Chicago, they had a room for uh, the flight attendants that, I don't want to use that word. I'm gonna say it. I can say it, right?
Say whatever you want.
The, they crossed the line. They were
Yeah,
scabs.
the
That's what they call
scabs.
them.
Yeah.
And yeah, and they crossed the line, and there was a room, and I remember, because as a gate agent, we still had to come to work, and a lot of these flight attendants were afraid because a lot of the flight attendants who had struck were threatening them.
Yeah.
So I remember all this. But there were planes flying around without empty passengers. I believe the number was 92% of the flight attendants struck. So there were a lot of planes flying around for 5 days without passengers. So American lost a lot of revenue.
Yeah.
So in December of that same year, I want to say it's 94 or 93, 93. Um, they had what's called a reduction in force throughout the United States, and um, I couldn't stay in Chicago. I either get laid off or I transfer to Kennedy. Yeah,
Uh-huh.
they called it a reduction in force. And I'll never forget, I got my reduction in force on January 2nd, where I was living in Chicago, FedEx.
Mm.
You have a choice, and you have 2 weeks to make a choice. But
Yeah.
that's what it calls a reduction of, Legacy Airlines reduction in force.
That's all right. I'll beep it out. So
Beep it out.
you've been around long enough with this company, with Legacy Airlines and all of its sister partners, that you've seen a lot. You've seen not even what some typical captains that have been here forever have seen, because you've
No.
been with the company in one way, shape, or form, starting out from reservations to gate agent to ramp to everything. You've done it all, and we haven't even gotten into the point where you decided you wanted to be a pilot, and you got to see you got to experience all this. And it's really because from a very young age, you had the people in your circle along your journey that enforced that you look at the big picture, that you don't just have the tunnel vision with a particular career. And then you were always, chess pieces moving around your strategic journey in your career and in your life, and you've been able to witness all of this stuff. And you mentioned something. I just want to make sure that our younger listeners understand this, because today we have what we call pilots associations, right? We call it unions, kind of like you call tissue Kleenex. It's a name brand. It's not all tissue is Kleenex. And we call them associations, and they're very important, and we need
Right.
them, and we need to make sure
Right.
that we have protections, and that we're not forced to always underbid our fellow pilot, man, woman, whatever. But a generation or two ago, we had what was called unions, and when you
Yes.
crossed a picket line, when it was legal for people to picket, because now we're under the Transportation Industry, the Railway Labor Act. Look it up, Google it. Now you have to have permission from a judge and all that kind of stuff. So you don't really, you see informational picketing, which Legacy Airlines and its sister company did very recently, just last year. But you don't see strikes, and you lived through a strike that, though it wasn't your department, it affected everything. And one could even argue, with that reduction in workforce, kind of sounds like what we're going through today, doesn't it?
Absolutely. And let me throw this in. Let me just throw this in. How I experienced the strike at the Legacy Airline. Um, some of the flight attendants were going around the terminal taking photos for the union. There was one particular gate agent manager. She was from France. Forgot her name, but I can probably, if I really search, can get her name. She stopped this flight attendant and she grabbed the flight attendant's hand to take the camera away, which you really can't do that in today's environment. Um, so obviously, the flight attendant called security, and she made a big deal about the manager grabbing her hand.
Of course.
Um, the manager, I had to go to court as a witness.
Wow. Yeah. I
I
mean,
did.
things were ruthless
I
back then.
did.
And
It was ruthless.
now we're all, oh, you got to be PC and I'm going to be offended by everything that you're offended by, so don't
Right.
offend me because I'm offended. And it's unfortunate that we live in that society now.
Hmm.
But when you crossed the picket line back then and got labeled a scab, it didn't matter who you worked for. That's it. Your career was almost predetermined to be difficult from that point forward, if not non-existent, you know?
And we know it still is for some of the flight attendants who crossed the picket line back then. When I became a flight attendant, back in 1995, and this was after I had transferred from Kennedy to Miami because I spent 4 months in Miami
Hmm.
as a gate agent. Um, some of the flight attendants were still talking about it, and when you would fly with some of the flight attendants who did not cross the picket line,
Yeah.
they were very vocal with the new hires. This person is so and so, they're a scab, and you should know this. You should not be nice to them, and yada yada. I mean, they were telling you what you should be,
Yeah.
how you should be behaving towards these individual flight attendants. I didn't agree with that, but because I wasn't a flight attendant at the time, so I didn't agree with that.
Yeah.
But I did experience the strike.
Yeah. Yeah. Not an easy time in the history of Legacy Airlines. That's for sure. And you got to experience it. And you actually got involved in some charitable organizations around that time. Can you tell me a little bit about
I did.
Something MAAgic Foundation?
Well, Something MAAgic I didn't get involved with until after I became a flight attendant.
Hmm.
And what the organization is, it's an organization that we bring kids from all parts of the world or different countries to give the kids to World Village in Orlando. And we're able to make their wish or grant them their wish to be able to go to the village as well as visit Disney World.
Hmm.
They are kids that have life-threatening or chronic illnesses. We're members of. Well, I was on the board, so the board consists of current at Legacy Airlines employees and Envoy and former PSA. And what we do is we volunteer our time to make sure that these wishes are granted. It's 2020, and this is the 21st year of the
Oh,
organization.
congratulations. And
Yeah,
are you still on the
yeah.
board of Something MAAgic Foundation?
I decided this year to step down from the board in 2020, but I'm still going to, assist them in any way that I can.
Mm-hmm.
It's probably just a temporary move right now. However, with everything going on, it doesn't seem like there's going to be a magic flight this year because of COVID-19.
Right.
So,
Right.
yeah, I'm still very involved.
So if I had to just kind of look back at this point from our conversation thus far and ask you, who really was the biggest influence for you for your journey that helped shape your decisions along your journey? Who would that person be?
Well, I would answer that question in different phases. I think different phases of my life, I can say that.
Sure. But
I
for this
can start
first
from
phase,
the
that we're talking about here at Legacy and at Sandpiper and, ticketing and deciding to change all
okay.
these departments in order to strategically put yourself in a good place for a very promising future. Who kind of helped you along the way the most?
I wouldn't necessarily say that he helped me. Should I say the name? I mean, I would
Just
like
a
to say
first name. You
yeah.
don't have to. Yeah.
Yeah, Mike. Yeah, Mike was very helpful. He was very encouraging. He was a young supervisor at the time. I would say he was in his mid-20s. He was probably not that much older than I was.
Hmm.
Well, he was maybe 5 or 6 years. Back then, that did make a big difference. And his advice on if you start moving around, as well as another supervisor, her name was Nancy. Um, I think she was his counterpart as well. They basically said if you move around, with the schooling that you're doing right now and the major that you're in, and you start moving around within this company, you can be extremely successful and eventually get into management and possibly higher management in Dallas.
Yeah.
So I
So,
would say Mike and Nancy. I would say two names,
yeah.
and they were reservation supervisors.
Ah, so very early on. Yeah. And
Hmm.
how did this, over the next 10 years transition to pilot training? I mean, did you just decide, hey, I want to learn that aspect of it as well? And here I am, I'm going to pull the trigger and go to flight school? Or how did that work?
No, no. Well, I after transferring to New York, I was an agent there and a gate agent. I did baggage service as well there. And after I did my time in New York, I transferred down to Miami because Miami was back then. A lot of people don't know this, but Miami was going to be the test airport for a computer software system called Insight, which was supposed to take over Sabre, and that never
Mhm.
materialized. Not many people know that. American Airlines was going to get away from Sabre and go to a program called Insight. Miami was the test base for it, and it never materialized. So I
Mm.
transferred down to Miami for 3.5 months. And when I was in Miami, I just decided to put in for the flight attendant job. And I said, oh, let me just put this in and just see what happens. I got hired. So,
Wow.
I got hired as a flight attendant, and I went to flight attendant training where I was based in Dallas, back to Kennedy, and then I went down back to Miami.
Mhm.
And 4.5 years into being a flight attendant, I would say in 1999, I was 29 years old. And I decided that it was time to make some changes. Either I was going to fulfill those dreams of either becoming a pilot or going to law school. I had to make a decision. The reason why I had not done it is because back in the late 90s, and you probably know this, 98, 97, 98, 99, Miami had gone through a time where it was being regentrified, and that's the perfect word. Um, the real estate here was skyrocketing.
Yeah.
I mean, 20, 30,000 every week. It was called the fastest appreciating area in the United States. So I dabbled a little bit into real estate and I was able to invest in some homes and I did really well with them. So that kind of took me off the whole management aspect of going into American Airlines because I was real estate investing. Um, but that was 98, 99. And back in, like I said, 99, December 99, I had made a decision I needed to fulfill one of these dreams. And what made me honestly go towards more the pilot was that in 99, it was around Christmas, Airbus 300. I was a purser, and I'd mentioned, I don't know, I just mentioned to one of the captains, I don't remember his name, and I told him, yeah, I really like your job, and I think what you guys do is fascinating. I'm thinking about going to flight school. And I've mentioned this to some people. He
Mhm.
looked at me from top to bottom, and he walked away. This was
Wow.
like around before this about December 21st to 22nd of 1999. That's what he did.
Wow.
One of our crusty senior captains at
Yeah.
the Legacy
This is
Airlines.
before
That's what he did. He gave
the
me that look like, please,
yeah,
right.
no letter 32 here or
So
whatever it is.
yeah, and I was like that mofo. Anyway,
Yeah.
stuff like that it doesn't upset me. It just makes me stronger. So on January 16th of 2000, I enrolled in flight school.
Nice.
Two
And where did
weeks
you
later,
enroll?
2.5 weeks later, I went to Florida Sun Coast. First of all, I got a student loan through the credit union,
Mhm.
and I also got a student loan through Sallie Mae.
Mhm.
I was trying to do it on loans, although I had my real estate investing. I had not sold my property yet. So I Florida Sun Coast Aviation, which was in Hollywood North Ferry Airport in Florida. I
Mhm.
got my private there, and then I didn't get my instrument because September 11th happened.
Mm.
So I didn't get my instrument until November of 2001, and I got it at ATA Flight School. It
Okay.
was the same school at the airport. It was
Yeah.
a different school at the airport.
Yeah.
Florida Sun Coast, after I'd gotten my private pilot's license, was being investigated for embezzling by the FBI.
Great.
They were taking student loans. They were not giving the student loans back, and I know they were doing some embezzling. They closed the school down. But you
Yeah.
can Google this. The owner
Yeah.
went to jail.
Yeah.
And I was happy that happened after my private pilot's license. So
Yeah.
anyway, I got my instrument, and I have I have a lot of stories on it. I got my instrument rating at ATA at North Perry Airport, and I got my commercial airborne systems, another flight school, up at what is it? They changed the name of it, Fort Lauderdale Executive.
Mm-hmm.
Then I got my CFI at Opelika at a school called Epic, and the owner of Epic Flight School is now an Airbus pilot for the Legacy.
Nice.
So I see him sometimes, yeah.
Oh, that's cool.
And I got my multi-engine, yeah, it's pretty cool. And I got my multi-engine at Clyde's multi-engine, which closed like 4 years ago in Dallas, Texas, in 4 days.
Oh. So
I
you
went
really
to
hopped
various
around. You
different
didn't
places.
stick with one school in particular. You kind of just said, okay, I'm going to do this program over here and this program over there. Was there a reason for that, or was it just the way it worked out?
Well, Florida Suncoast, obviously, I would prefer to finish all my ratings there, but they got closed down, and the owner went to jail because of embezzlement.
Right.
After September 11th, ATA was having some problems. They opened up. They went, they closed, unfortunately, for a while, and they were opened up under a different management, because after September 11th, as you know, a lot of these flight schools went under.
Right.
Then comes Airborne Systems. Airborne Systems Flight School, which closed down as well. I was able to get my commercial there, and I was going to continue my CFI there, but I didn't know their future. I didn't know if they were going to stay open, so I decided to go to another flight school that was closer to home.
So really, it was because of the economy and the effects from 9/11 and how flight schools were struggling. And I remember that time very well because I actually started the bulk of my training after 9/11. I started my private and my instrument stuff before, but ended up going to a flight school after 9/11. And it was one of the flight schools that was shut down by the FBI because they actually trained 4 of the terrorists.
See that?
And their pictures were immediately collected from the FBI and taken down from the wall. They used to have all the student photos, 8x10s of all the student photos up on the wall, and you could just look, and their name was there, so you knew if you were coupled to fly with somebody, you could see what they look like, and you could meet them out on the flight line. The FBI came in one day after 9/11, shut the doors, put a padlock on it, and took those photos and walked out with all the records. And that's the school I attended. So,
would you believe that 20 years later, none of the flight schools I went to are open?
Yeah, I would, because none of the flight schools I went to are open. I mean, it's kind of like a bar. Bars don't last very long. They just.
But after September 11th, it really hurt the industry, especially with the flight schools.
Yeah,
especially the flight schools.
So how long did your training take? Was that a couple of years of going back and forth, and you were still flying at Legacy, or so you're still flying?
I was still flying at Legacy. I was still flying at Legacy.
Yeah.
And back then at Legacy, there was these amazing trips as a flight attendant that you could fly. For example, there was a Caracas or a Bogota that you would leave late at night and you would come back the next morning. So what I would do, it took me about 3.5 to 4 years to get all my ratings. That's how long it took me. I didn't do it full time. I did it part time, but I tried to fly at least 2 or 3 times a week. I tried in the beginning.
Yeah.
I instructed for about 300 hours. And the way I did my instruction after I got my CFI is I bought an airplane.
Yeah, nice.
I had a 172M. Yeah, I had a 172M model.
Where was it parked?
1973. Opelika first, and then North Perry. And I regret selling that airplane. I sold it 5 years ago.
Oh, not too long ago. You had it quite a long time. I saw pictures on your social account there, you and your baby.
Yeah, I called her Chantiqua because she was in the ghetto and she was old. Chantiqua, that's her name.
Wonderful. That's wonderful. So you're training 3 to 4 years, part-time training, working as a flight attendant for Legacy. the whole time, and being able to
Yep.
pay for your training through both student loans and with investments and whatnot, and buying an airplane and stuff. A really smart way to do it, not the traditional
Yep.
kind of cookie cutter, you know, pilot farm way of doing it. And that always, believe it or not, even though I went to a pilot farm, okay, I'm the first to admit it, but anyone that breaks out of that mold and kind of sees outside the box and carves a path that's a little bit more difficult, a little bit more challenging, but a lot more rewarding in the end, I think they usually their experiences define the quality of their airmanship, their decision making, because they didn't just go and stay within the yellow lines. They were able
I
to
did
kind of
not.
do what you do. What you did with all
Yeah.
this, and that's really an amazing way to do it. And I applaud you for that. It's a wonderful story. What were the biggest challenges you had during that time?
Building time. Yeah, I would say the time building. I mean, I've done flights that I probably would never do again. Back then, there was a gentleman at North Perry Airport who owned a Piper Apache, and he didn't fly. But what he did is he would sell his time to guys who wanted to buy like 100 block hours. So
Huh.
you pay him, and back then it was like $5,000. You can't get that today.
Yeah.
But that Piper Apache, the left engine was the critical engine was very close to TVO.
Oh.
So my foot was always on that right rudder, ready to go, ready to go. And it's interesting because one of the guys who was flying the airplane had the engine failure on it,
uh,
and he made the news. Coming from, I want to say it was Bimini, who he happens to be a captain now. At not, he's Italiano,
Davvero.
Paolo. Yeah, Paolo.
Is he JetBlue?
He went No, he went to work at one of the regionals, and now
Oh.
he's a captain at because he had an Italian passport. Not Emirates. What's the other airline?
Mm,
Etihad.
oh,
He's an
okay.
Airbus captain at Etihad now.
Wow.
At
Yeah.
330. Yeah,
Yeah.
he left. He is it Chautauqua? Was it one of those regionals he worked for a couple of years? He
Chautauqua,
has an
St.
Italian
Louis.
passport.
Yeah.
I think it was Chautauqua.
Yeah.
Yeah, and
Chautauqua
he went to there.
traditionally did a lot of the work visas from people over in Europe. I've actually had the pleasure to interview a few people that started their career by coming over from Europe and landing a job after training with Chautauqua in St. Louis. So it's actually a very common thing that they were doing at the time. Yeah,
Well, he
very
was
cool.
smart. I mean, he's a captain there now. I want to say he's been gone maybe 15, 16 years now.
Yeah,
So I would say maybe not that long, but yeah, I'm friends with him on Facebook.
that's awesome. Yeah, it's amazing
Yeah,
how social media can keep us closer together. I mean, that's
yeah,
when social media works. When you're not struggling to get the most likes or the most hits on a particular thing, or
yeah.
how many comments you can get, but you use it to connect with friends and family that otherwise, you just, what are you going to do? Like write a letter, a postcard? I mean, come on, that's not the way we do things anymore. Western Union doesn't come by to pick up the mail. So to be able to connect through Facebook, through Instagram or whatever, emails, it's amazing when used correctly.
I can write a book for everything I've been through.
You really
I
could,
can write
and
a
I
I
I,
could write a
I
book. Let me
encourage
tell
you
you.
to look into a memoir of Owen Koto, L'Italiano, Puerto Rico.
Yeah, there
Yep.
you go. There you
Hey,
go.
forget about it. So 2007 comes by. Okay, let's fast forward. We get there,
Okay,
and
2007.
you end up at what we call here Sandpiper Regional. How
Oh
did this
God,
happen?
yeah. Well, of course, I needed my multi-engine time, and right before I got hired at Sandpiper Regional, one of the legacy captains who happened to be my mentor, his name was Jay. He was able to hook me up with a guy who flew a citation corporate,
Oh,
and I flew 125 hours on a citation. I didn't
very
get
cool.
paid for it. I did it just to build time,
Hmm.
and you can log it because you're being instructed.
Ah,
So, I was able to get like about between the Apache time and the jet time. I had jet time now. I had about 225 hours of multi-engine and jet time. I got hired at Sandpiper Airlines,
very
and
nice.
I flew the ATR. I got hired into the ATR out of Miami,
Hmm.
and that was quite an experience because the ATR training was definitely a challenge. It was an interesting plane to fly,
That
but it was a
airplane,
very
my hat's off to you.
fun plane
I
to
was
fly.
scared.
Yeah.
I was in class. I was not far ahead of you, actually. I was in the December '06 class at Sandpiper.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah, so
July '07.
you were July. Yeah, I remember we talked about it like 6-7 months
July.
apart. And the ATR, I was like, I was told by others, they're like, "Oh, that's a hard airplane, man. That's a hard airplane. That's a real airplane." You know.
I'm surprised I passed.
Between that and the Saab, I was like, I don't want a turboprop. I'm deathly afraid of turboprops. I'm always afraid that someone's going to walk in the arc while you're at the gate, with one engine running to have electrical power at an outstation, and something terrible is going to. And I don't want to be anywhere near that. I always thought, no, if I'm going to be flying for an airline, I want a turbine aircraft. To me, that just was going to be a safer bet. But that aside, and to Curtis Jacobson, if you're listening right now, you used to send me autopsy photos while I was in flight school, and you were in flight school, young man. And that, I told you, stop, don't do that anymore, because those were so disturbing and freaked me the hell out so bad that for the rest of my life, the rest of my career, I'm going to do everything I can to stay away from turboprops. Not because I don't respect them, but because I'm deathly afraid of that scenario happening. And I owe it all to you, Curtis. So cut that shit out. But I digress.
Well, someone got chopped up in Chicago. You know that, the ATR. Did you know that?
No, I didn't know that.
I want to say it was one of the, I don't know what year it was. And one of the rampers got chopped up with a blade.
Yeah, man.
Chicago. It was in Chicago.
That freaks me out, man. I was fortunate. But you got to go to the islands. You got to do all that island flying, and some of that VFR departures, and and picking up IFR en route, and sectionals from the chief pilot, and again outside of that safe lane, outside of that box, and you got to do the more challenging flying, whether by choice or by circumstance. You were in it.
By choice, yeah.
Yeah, you did it.
By choice.
You did it. And, what a wonderful experience. And how long were you at the executive side of Sandpiper?
The executive side of Sandpiper, 4.5 years, before they decided to get rid of the ATRs and or retire the ATRs. And then I was able to transfer into the better side of Sandpiper.
Yeah. Well, the other side. The other side. Yeah. So
the jet side of them.
The jet, and then they ended up opening Miami as a base anyway. So, there you go. And so here you were, having held positions in the company under pretty much everything shy of upper management. And you've experienced many departments, many people, many cultures, many different bases and families, because really that's what they were, especially, and to a certain extent they still are today, a family. And at that point, here you were now, you got the wings pinned on, you had quite a bit of experience behind your belt. Was it really all that you thought it would be and imagined to be at the controls of an airplane, or did you ever regret it at any point?
I had no regrets. The only thing I had questioned was if the legacy part of the, or not the legacy, but the regional part of the airline, if that was the right choice for me. The culture was much different in 2007. And I think you can relate to that. The culture was different. It was a different group of instructors. The training department was very challenging. They were very challenged. That's the right word.
Yeah.
It was an old school mentality. I embrace that a lot of those behaviors have changed and continue to change for many different reasons. And that's the only thing that I would say that I questioned, but I don't have any regrets.
Excellent.
I think that I have no regrets.
Actually, remember,
I never like to live in a box. So
yeah, and I think that's really played in your favor. Yeah, that's played in your favor, absolutely. And I can remember you, without dropping names, and I know he's retired, but his son, I believe, is a pilot at Legacy. So no dropping names, but you remember there was that sim instructor. I bring the
One of the
stick.
three.
I bring the stick into the sim. If I hit you in the head or the hand with the stick, it's mean I want you to pay attention. It's not because I'm hitting you. And then whack. Whoa, what the fuck is that?
Well, since you brought it up, I was said, F you. You want to kill yourself? I was hit behind a chair. The chair was hit behind the headdress. The ATR program was a trip, and especially in Spanish, where some of the instructors don't speak English too well, so they're yelling at you like this. Coño, muñeca. It's just negative training. Negative training. A lot has changed from 2007.
Oh, it's a 180.
And what doesn't
Absolutely.
kill you makes you stronger, right? What doesn't kill you makes you stronger.
Yeah.
So, tough as nails, man. I was not going to let them get me.
Yeah, I'm glad I experienced it. I mean, seeing grown men cry coming out of the sim was not something I ever really expected, especially at this level of the game. This isn't, flying a Cessna around and go, oh, I screwed up that VOR stall. No, this is like this is your career. This is your livelihood potentially for your future. And it could be crushed by one person because of their training methods. That was tough, but I lived through it. And like you said, it doesn't kill you, makes you stronger. And I spent time at Sandpiper, as I've mentioned in the show. I'm very proud of that time that I spent training, working on the line for the training department. I went through that, I think, for a reason. It was the universe telling me I will never take that road with anyone, regardless of how frustrated I may get, how hard-headed, or how just they're not getting it. And it's like, why aren't you getting it? I never took that road because I experienced it. And if I hadn't experienced it, who knows? Maybe I would have become kind of a jerk in the cockpit or in the sim or whatever. So yeah, like you said, it was an experience that we went through. It's completely different now, and which is a good thing now with this kinder, gentler way of doing things, AQP, and it's positive learning now instead of negative learning. So somewhere in there, you got involved with the program, and I remember when you and I flew together. And this was after you had transitioned over to the Embraer 145, and you and I flew together. I think you were just about getting ready to upgrade, and I was only a captain for maybe a year or so. So you and I flew together. We hit it off, and I'm listening to your story as we do, once we fly together, a couple legs, a couple days, and just so impressed with all of it. And really, we didn't have time to kind of talk about everything we're talking about today. And I never really knew all the intricate details, but you gave me the cliff notes, and I was just so impressed. And then you told me you were involved in a program called HIMS. And what can you tell us about what HIMS is?
Well, HIMS stands for Human Intervention Motivational Study. And, with my experiences, I would say throughout the various departments, especially with what we all went through at the Torture airline, which was a great, nice. it changed to become a great airline, the Torture. I was already involved with Something MAAgic. I wasn't sure how much I wanted to overextend myself, but I'm a firm believer it's important to get back. And what HIMS does is, pilots who have problems with drugs, alcohol, or any types of substance abuse, they're allowed to, if they test a positive and a DOT test, or if they have a DUI, they're able to come in this program. And if they pass all the requirements that the program requires, then they're able to get back to the flight deck. However, it will be monitored for several years, but it gives them the opportunity to give them a second chance, which I think is what many pilots deserve, because we work in an environment where a lot of people feel that we don't deserve a second chance, and we're not perfect for human beings. And along with HIMS, I was also the Aeromedical Chairman, so I was very involved. I became a monitor of pilots. I became a vice chair and eventually became the chairman of HIMS for ALPA. Yeah,
for Sandpiper.
ALPA for Sandpiper. I gotta keep remembering Sandpiper.
Yeah.
I've helped a lot of guys, and until this day, I hear a lot of them. I just saw one recently, and thanked me, and he said that his wife really appreciates everything I did for them, because obviously with any type of abuse, it affects the family as well. Um, my father was an alcoholic. My father drank for many years. Um, I come from a Latino family where that's what happens. Men drink. On my mother's side and my father's side, they were both alcoholics. I don't drink at all. So I try to figure out why I was a chosen one. I mean,
Yeah.
I haven't even done 420.
What?
Never.
What's that?
420? Who knows?
What's that? I never in
What
California.
is
I'd never heard
420?
of California. And the other day was 42020, so I got a text on that, and I said, "Oh Jesus!"
Never have. I don't know what that is.
I'm like, I don't know what
So,
that is.
yeah. So I mean, I think one of the current chairman, the former chairman at the time, someone had mentioned to him about my background, and
Mhm.
he asked me if I would become a monitor, and I was a little hesitant because we know how problematic we are as pilots, but I was a little hesitant. But I decided to take on the challenge only because I have had a background. I have had a background. That's a good way to put it. When I was a kid, I've been an Alateen, which is the younger version of Al-Anon. Um, when my father drank, and he doesn't drink anymore. He's been sober for many years. But
Oh,
I
congratulations, man.
even
Yeah.
experienced that. Thank you. I experienced that as a child. We were actually very close,
Yeah.
and it's a way that I give back to honor him, and because he's helped a lot of people as well when he was going through his journey.
Yeah.
Um, and so I became a monitor, and then the chairman flowed, and the new chairman asked me if I would become his vice chair because he saw how passionate I was about the program, how involved I was.
Yeah.
I took it very serious. Um, I went to some of the pilots' home,
Mhm.
um, and with some of them, I even escorted them to rehab,
Wow.
and I just took it very serious. One of the guys, I actually went to his house when I was vice chair, and I make sure his ass got in that car to rehab. Because what happens is, if you're not, if you don't get the opportunity to be in the HIMSS program, you're done,
Right.
and and you won't get a job not even at McDonald's because you have to pass a background check. And a lot of these guys don't realize that. The joke that I had was, you're going to end up working at a strip club or an adult bookstore because they don't have those requirements. That's what I would say. Um,
Yeah.
we have had some pilots that a couple who have lived under a bridge because they've lost everything. Fact,
Yeah.
fact.
It's the
So
choices we
and
make
yeah,
that define us. It really is. And
exactly.
we're like you said, we're human, and sometimes we go down a road that we have a hard time backing out of, and the choices that
Right.
we made
Hmm.
maybe years ago led to this point, and you think, how the hell did I get here? But it's just too hard to turn back. And it's because of people like you, people that have their own addiction, I would say. You have an addiction with helping people. You have an addiction
I do.
with
I
being
do.
there
I
for
do.
people, supporting the people that need it the most, between the children. I mean, that alone is just so impressive,
Very
and
rewarding. It's very, very rewarding.
because it's the
It
honesty
is.
and the look on their face and the purity from the Something MAAgic Foundation that you spent all that time with. And then, getting involved with the HIMSS program and working through those developments. But you didn't stop there. You also got involved with Sandpiper pilot recruitment, didn't you?
You've done your homework. I did, yeah. I was asked um, someone asked me, I forgot who it was. Um, why don't I, apply to recruitment? And I was like, why? But I did anyway. And yeah, I was in recruitment for about a year. And
Yeah.
I was a part-time recruiter, and I really enjoyed recruitment. Recruitment was a lot of fun.
What was it that made it
Um,
so enjoyable?
the passion in young students' eyes about wanting to be where I was at, and that any word that would say can drive them to become pilots or drive them not to become pilots. I had to be careful of the words I used and the phrases that I used, because with any career, if you say a negative word or a negative phrase, you can put, you can really hurt someone's wish or their desire, or their passion to get into that career.
Yeah.
You have to be careful. Words are very powerful. And when I went to Embry-Riddle as a recruiter, and when I went to Intercontinental in Puerto Rico, the university,
Oh, cool.
and then the one in Long Island as well as a recruiter, the students are engaged. They're passionate. They want to talk about aviation. They want to talk about our career. They want to talk about our journey. And if you said something negative, then you've already planted a negative seed.
Mm.
But if you just speak positive to them, I mean, the passion continues, the passion lives.
I
You and
can't
I will
think.
eventually move forward.
I can't think of
You know?
anyone better suited for that. I mean, the positivity that oozes from you every time we talk or interact. I mean,
Uh,
geez, So wow, what a 30 years in, right? Or just this year, 30 years?
29 years this year. 29 years on July
29 coming up.
July 29th will be 29 years.
It'll be 20.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, just an
I'm going to
amazing.
be 35. Can you believe it?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, that's what happens when you're in diapers and you get a job at Legacy Airlines.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah.
Manual labor to
Hell yeah.
yeah, manual labor.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And all of this, there's a theme. And we've kind of talked about this already. And the theme is giving back. And it's funny because it reminds me of a story. And if you would allow me, I had a new hire pilot that I was flying with back at Sandpiper years ago. And I think I mentioned this in a podcast very early on in this progression of podcasts and the journey that I'm in now
Mhm.
with this podcasting thing. And we flew together. I was at the time a newer captain based in the New York market. And we were flying
Mhm.
in and out of LaGuardia for that trip sequence. And he had been with the company just shy of 2 years. And the first 2 legs of that sequence, it was complain, bitch, moan, complain. The company and my app is out and everywhere. And I've got at least 3,000 hours total time. And I don't know why these Southwest isn't hiring me. And these guys, and it's because I'm a white male. And if I was not a white male, then I'd be hired already, And this is beat crap. And no. After about the middle of the third leg, I looked at him. I'm like, I'm sorry. Please don't take offense to this. Would you just shut the up? And his eyes got all big. He's like, what? And I was like, man, look, if I can tell you've been flying with senior captains, correct me. He goes, no, you're right. I've been flying with a lot of senior captains and I've been holding the line. So I'm like, yeah, no, I get it. And all you're doing is spitting out exactly what you hear every day, day in, day out from these guys that have been with this company 20 years and been sitting in that seat for the past 17 years. And they're not going anywhere. And no one's hiring them. And they complain, but all they do is show up, they clock in, they do their job, what's asked of them, then they clock out, they go home, and they go fishing and drinking beer. Not that there's anything wrong with that. And that's all they do. And they complain. And now here you are, young and impressionable, and all you're doing is spitting out the bull crap. Do you ever ask yourself why they're still at a regional airline with all that experience and thousands of hours? Maybe it's because that's really all they do. And I told him, I said, when I was hiring people for my previous profession, I was a manager for Costco. Great career field, great company, still is. I mean, take a look at that stock price. Hello. And
it is, yeah.
And my managers taught me that, the people that you hire they're either going to be in your back pocket, always there for you, willing to go the extra mile, or they're going to be terrible.
Right.
And I will personally make sure that they follow you from department to department, building to building for the rest of your career because you hired them. And so pick right. And he taught me how to pick. And when I was looking at hundreds and hundreds of applications for this, big box retailer, I would have 2 stacks. The big stack were okay, thanks, we received your application. And then the short stack was I'm going to give this guy or gal a call. And they were the ones that had those little tiny bullet points at the bottom of the resume that said all that extracurricular stuff that they do, the volunteering, the programs, the camps, because that shows me that they go the extra mile. And I told this young man, I'm like, look, man, it's okay if you want to do this and have that career and be here and complain and take all that negativity, that dark soot home with you.
Right.
And it's going to bleed into every aspect of your life, your relationships, your family. Fine, so be it. You're an adult. You make your own decisions. But if I could give you some advice, I'm willing to give it. And he goes, "Oh, please, yeah." And I'm like, "Look, man, you need to be a 10%er."
Yeah.
And he said, "What's a 10%er?" I'm like, "That short stack of applications. That's 10% of the applications I would get. I'm like, when's the last time that you went into the chief pilot's office and said, hey, do you have any special assignment work I can do maybe once or twice a month? You're going to get paid. It's not
Right,
like you're doing it
right,
for free. They'll just
right.
pull you off your trip and put you on a special assignment. I'm like, did you ever think about becoming a union mentor? Talk to new hires and help
Right,
them if they have any questions? You ever think about
right,
becoming a LOSA observer as an FO, sitting in the jump seat a couple times a week and filling out a report on your time? You won't get paid any extra, but you'll get paid for the flight time, and you're not
right,
controlling or manipulating the aircraft. Seems pretty
right.
easy. And then all those little bullet points in the bottom of your resume start to pop up. And then you start submitting your applications out there with your thousands of hours, big whoop. And then you can tell me that you're being discriminated against because you're white and a male. Then you can start talking this way. You know, I saw that individual about 8 months later, pulled me aside in Chicago, shook my hand, and said, hey, man, I just want to say thank you because I've got 2 interviews coming up. One's at JetBlue. And I'm like, good, man. What did you
Wow.
do? He goes, I became a LOSA pilot and I started working with recruitment for the company. And he goes, and it was that talk you had with me that one day. And now when I fly with those guys that all they do is complain, I just kind of turn them off. I don't listen. And I'm like, change your life. He goes, yeah. And I'm like, thank you. And to me, that was the biggest reward, biggest, compliment that he could have given me. And your entire journey is filled with just that. And I can see how addicting
Yeah.
that can be. I can see how that just makes you feel so worth everything. I mean, the value that you're contributing, that you're giving back. And I really do encourage all those aviators out there that are listening to the program that maybe are going through it, plan to go through it, or even that have made it and they're at a legacy carrier and looking ahead, what can you contribute? And that's really the question that we should be asking each other, especially now, especially during this crisis.
Well, it's interesting what you just said because that's what happens with a lot of the aviators. I'm not going to say most, but some. They make it to the legacy, and they forget what got them there,
Mm-hmm.
and they forget to become mentors, and they forget to talk to the younger generation, I should say, or maybe even volunteer or assist. Um, it just becomes like some of the groups on Facebook or other places on the web that all they do is
Yeah.
complain. As conspiracy theorists, what's going to happen? They have the crystal ball and they know what the future is going to bring with the current industry. And I just find that very amusing. And the reason I find that very amusing is because as long as I've been here and everything that I've seen, um, no matter what happens, what's guaranteed at an airline, like our airline, Legacy Airline,
Mm-hmm.
is it's going to be what it's going to be, and we can't control it. And what
Yeah.
you're saying now, all this negative stuff or stuff that people are making up in a lot of these websites, like below the line, it's just a figment of your imagination. You're making things up,
It
and
is
you
entertainment.
can't control what's going. It's
Again,
entertainment, and you're
it's
perfect
it.
word.
Yeah.
And you can't control what's going to happen because it's going to happen, and it's not under our control. It is
Yeah.
what it is.
Yeah.
I will say this: I am a HIMS monitor now. I'm involved with HIMS. I didn't tell you that, and I've been involved with HIMS since October. I was asked to. Someone asked me, and I said yes. So I have 2 guys that I'm monitoring right now, and the reason I'm bringing that up is because we know that with the current situation, we're going to get a lot more people in this program, if not the wingman program.
Yep. And we've talked
Absolutely.
about this in previous episodes of Squawk Ident. The very
Hmm.
baseline way to reach out doesn't matter if you're a pilot, a flight attendant, a grocery store clerk, a driver for UPS. It doesn't matter. Your company is going to have some kind of program called EAP, the Employee
Right.
Assistance Program. And it's a
Right.
phone call away. Most of the time, you don't even
Right.
have to talk to your supervisor. You can just Google it. And you make a phone call. If you're feeling down, if you know something isn't right, if the hair on the back of your neck is standing up because you feel like something's wrong, no shame, call. with the pilot group, we're very fortunate at Legacy Airlines to have programs like the ones you've mentioned that are phenomenal. And I've mentioned Wings before. It's a phenomenal program. It is amazing. People's careers have been saved, and more importantly, people's lives have been saved by these programs. And this is total seriousness here. We don't want to make light of how important these programs are, and they are available. So it doesn't matter. Get off the computer, turn the damn TV off, turn off CNN or Fox or MSNBC or whatever you're watching, because all of that propaganda is just that. And at the end of the day, the only thing that's important is your well-being, knowing that everything's going to be okay. If it starts to feel like it's not, you need to reach out a hand. I guarantee you there'll be 20 hands right back at you, willing to lift you up. And we both you and I are of the same mindset, that we know that we are here today standing on the shoulders of all of those people that lifted us up to be in this position. And I'll never forget that, Yeah. And you mentioned that was something that I was talking about here just a moment. You came over to Legacy Airlines through the infamous flow-through agreement that anybody can Google and find out. But when did you come over to the Legacy carrier?
I came over to Legacy carrier in end of July, early August 2018. Like a lot of people, I was trying to get hired through the front door, and I came close. Unfortunately, I had to take my application out. I lost my spouse to cancer, and
God, I'm so sorry.
I try not to touch that one. Thank you. That's a very delicate subject that it's very difficult for me to discuss to this day.
Sure.
But that almost took. I almost left the industry, but I did not. And I guess this is a way to get back and honor the legacy. So, I floated in July of 2018.
Yeah. So you're, I think, 4.5 months behind me, which makes sense because that was kind of pretty much what we were over at Sandpiper. Thank you for sharing all that with us. You are an amazing man, let me tell you. And I have no qualms about saying that. I mean, that is between that and all the programs you're involved in and the challenges that you have struggled on your journey to overcome. You are really someone to look towards. And at this point, what I'd like to do is just ask you a couple quick back and forth question and answer sessions here, if you would bear with me. And some of these, you answer it however you want. But that's the fun. That's the fun part of this. So, what has been the most significant driving factor in your pursuit for a career in aviation?
Determination. Are you looking for a phrase or are you looking for a word?
There are no wrong answers here.
Okay. All right. Okay. You know what? I'm passionate about aviation. I think that, I know that the career in aviation is an amazing career that you learn a lot about different people, not just the people who you transport, but the people who you fly with. And I also think that our type of job keeps you young. And I think it keeps you young because you're involved with, you get involved with a lot of what's going on in the world. That's the way I would answer that. Yeah. And it's not just a job, it's a livelihood, it's a lifestyle.
Yeah, it really is. Absolutely. And it's ingrained in our very DNA. It really is. So thus far on your journey, you've had a sensational journey, and I just can't wait to hear what is going to happen in the next 20 years. I really can't, not just with your journey, but with all of our journeys. Part of the really biggest driving factor for me to decide, hey, I'm going to freaking produce a podcast, it was that fact that I think the journey, I've always wondered and I've always asked the questions and I've always loved to sit there in the cockpit on the flight line, flying along at 37,000 feet and getting to hear these stories. A lot of people say, oh, look at the view from my office. After a couple of years of that, I'm like, yeah, that's great. So tell me about, how did you get into aviation? And they look at you like, I'm not going to tell you, I've told the story a million times. But by the end of the trip, I get to hear a wonderful story about their journey. And that's the driving factor to start Squawk Ident. And it's these question and answers that I really enjoy because we start to get into kind of like the meat and potatoes of people. We've heard your story. Your story is amazing. And then I ask you a question like, what were some of the biggest challenges along the way in your journey thus far?
The biggest challenges, well, the number one biggest challenge I would say is losing my spouse, um, because it's the biggest support that I could ever have. And when you lose the person who is your biggest cheerleader, I mean, that could do a number on you. So that's how I would answer that.
Yeah. Well, I
Um,
don't want to dive into an area that you don't feel comfortable talking about.
Absolutely, that's okay.
So, but when you say that, I think, how does one get over that? How does one, like you said, you almost quit the game at that point. How did
You
you?
know, I don't think you ever 100% get over it. I think you learn to live with it. And I think that you eventually have to learn to accept it. Um, I have an amazing family on both sides and great friends. And, I'm strong willed. And I think it's important to live life and continue to live life and live both legacies, is what I feel.
Yeah,
So that's the way, that I look at life right now.
yeah, and it's very very clear, at least in my eyes, hearing your story, how strong of a person you really are. You know, in this flying experience at the controls of an airplane, what has been your most difficult situation, and how did you solve it?
I would say at the regional airline, back in it's interesting because it's 5 years now. Um, we had that emergency uh, where we thought we had lost. Uh, we had flight control issues, and we thought maybe part of the aileron came off, or something came off the rudder. The rudders, rudder pedal, excuse me, and the yoke were shaking aggressively. And this is a flight from Dallas to Cincinnati. I'm sure you've heard about this.
I
We
believe
made
we
the news.
reviewed it in in training a few times.
Yeah, I'm sure you heard about this. But anyway, we had the rudders, rudder pedal, excuse me, and the yoke were shaking aggressively on climb out on the flight from Dallas to Cincinnati, and I had a new hire FO
Hmm.
who happens to be a captain now, and we're actually really good friends. So it was just making those quick decisions at that time. Once you get your nerves under control and the decisions that you have to make and what you had to do to land without, not knowing what was really going on with the plane.
Yeah.
I would say that.
And what was the ultimate conclusion on what caused the aggressive shaking?
The mechanics said they had something to do with the outflow valve, but it seems like they really didn't know. And this aircraft supposedly had this happen 2 times prior. And one of them did involve also an emergency landing
Mhm.
with a UPS pilot in the back of the plane as a passenger. So it was, we were told the shaking was just as aggressive. That's what we were told.
Yeah. Yeah. I believe
That's
it was,
strange.
I
I mean,
think what,
you don't know if it's an alien. Hmm?
yeah, I think it was something to do with the rigging and something was mounted backwards in the rigging of the rudder. I think from if I remember correctly from the training synopsis that we reviewed after the event happened, that airplane did have that issue. It could not duplicate. They signed it off, went to test fly it. Could not duplicate it. It got back on the line. Happened again, and it had something to do with the speed of the aircraft and the rigging. Something got placed incorrectly and caused an aggressive oscillation of the flight controls. So yeah, you experienced that. You lived through it. That's amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, the right word is you freak out for like a second, and then you go into your training mode.
Yeah.
And when I think back at that moment, and that was 5 years ago this week, it's just hard to believe that even happened. And but you're trained for these types of emergencies, and
Yeah.
you know I didn't take time off. It's whatever.
It
It is what
happens.
it is. That's what we're
Yeah.
trained for, right? Things
Exactly.
happen. Yeah.
So you've been at this game a long time. What's your favorite layover destination thus far?
At the Legacy,
Anywhere.
should I be honest about this or
For
should I
sure.
joke?
No, whatever you want.
um, Well, everyone knows how much I love what's that city west of Toronto, Kitchener, Canada. Like my
You
favorite
like
all-time
Kitchener?
destination. Hell no. Are
The
you
only thing
kidding?
open
I
was
spent New
Moose's
Year's Eve there
Lounge.
one time. Yeah,
I
on New
hated
Year's Eve
that
I spent
place.
one day there. I was ready to hang myself.
It's like a 10
You know,
below and you're deplaning by stairs and you're like, what the frick did I get myself into here?
do you know at the regional, my favorite layover I would say was Appleton, Wisconsin.
Oh, yeah,
And we
Appleton
had
was
just started
nice,
flying there, and I just thought that was a great layover.
especially in spring.
And
Yeah.
right now at the Legacy as a pilot, as a flight attendant, my favorite layover was London and Paris.
Oh, yeah.
Obviously, the Airbus is not flying there yet. At least our Airbus isn't.
Yeah.
Um, I would have to go with Honolulu.
Why Honolulu and not Kona or Maui or something like that?
You know, I never went to Kona.
Oh,
I've been to Maui, but I've never been to Kona.
yeah.
And you know, I just had a really, it felt peaceful. It didn't feel like it was work. It felt like vacation. And I've worked with the regional, and I've gone to various islands in the Caribbean, but
Hmm.
it was just nice.
Yeah.
Would I vacation there for my vacation? No, I just thought that they're fun
Yeah.
layovers. I went to Honolulu twice
I
as
have
a
an
pilot.
affinity for Maui simply because I have family there. My brother-in-law lives
Okay,
in Lahaina, and so if I can make a phone call or rent a car and drive over to his side of the island on a layover and see family and hang out and go, take a dip in the pool, aka the Pacific, and amazing.
yeah,
Honolulu is though my favorite layover simply because for a layover as a working crew member, it's got everything you want, and you can go to a different hole in the wall eatery, whatever, every
yeah,
single layover, and have a great time. The people are laid back. I
yeah,
love getting my hair cut in Honolulu because there are so many Japanese and Korean tiny little, one chair barbershops, and they charge $10. Come on, I cut your hair. I'm like, oh, sweet. And then you start asking them questions and kind of look who you're talking to here, and you find out a little bit about their journey, and it's just amazing. But I think Kauai is an
I never
island.
flew
Lahui,
there.
yeah, great
Yeah, really.
destination if you like hiking, and you get out of the little hotel and go walk around and put on your hiking boots or go for a run. I used to love running around some of the old town and see these old city halls and just the culture is just amazing. So yeah, I'm right there with you. Um, Definitely the islands.
You know,
But
like sometimes you read a book and it gives you a feel good feeling, or you watch a movie or show and you feel good about it.
yeah,
And I would say that I've been to Honolulu several times, but the few layovers that I had when I was based in Los Angeles, I had that feel good feeling when I laid over there.
in Los
It was
Angeles.
nice. It's really, really nice.
And
Yeah, I was based in Los Angeles for 2.5 months.
right, I remember.
Yeah, right out of training, I chose it because I wanted to spend time with my niece and nephew. My niece lives in Inglewood, and my nephew
Mm.
lives in Rancho Cucamonga. So I spent some time with them while I
Rancho
was out there.
Cucamonga. That's
Rancho, you guys say
my
the
next
Puerto
door
Rican
neighbor.
Rancho Cucamonga.
Rancho
Yeah,
Cucamonga. Yes, yes, very,
Rancho Cucamonga.
very
Yeah.
beautiful city. Yes. So difficult situations. You're flying, whatever, flying, working on the call center, at a gate. Most difficult situation. How'd you handle it?
Well, as a gate agent, there's a lot of difficult situations,
Of
but I'm going to
course.
use this situation as a gate agent. Um, there is a flight coming in from London, and in New York, we, as a gate agent, we would meet obviously the flight, and it was a medical emergency because there's a woman who had mixed prescription drugs, which is interesting, ironic, with alcohol. So the paramedics met her
Yeah.
or met the aircraft, and they had to strap her down. And I was the agent who met the aircraft, and she kept looking at me. She kept calling me a black Nazi.
Oh
Yeah, I
God.
don't get offended. Like, she was a black woman. I don't get it. She looked like Milli Vanilli. She kind of looked like one of those guys, but they look like girls,
Yeah, it's true.
And she's just like, and then people are trying to say, "Don't worry, don't yeah, it's true." There you
Yeah.
go. And I'm like looking at her. "Well, how can I get offended? She's as dark as I am." And I just was
Yeah.
very calm about it because I was young. I was younger back then. I wasn't like this bitch. She's calling me a black Nazi. But you're gonna love this. Then she gets up like like Linda Blair. They had to strap her,
Yeah.
and then she just like puts her head like bobbles up, and you would think it was like Linda Blair, like in The Exorcist.
Yeah.
And she turns around and she calls me Nazis are invading my uterus. I was just looking at her. That's what she said. So I guess that situation was kind of strange because I didn't want to laugh because I didn't want to make the situation worse. And I didn't want to get upset because
Oh
she was
my
calling me a
God.
black Nazi. So
Right.
that was funny. That was one of the situations. As an agent,
Yeah.
as a flight attendant, I got stories. As a flight attendant, there was a flight attendant who is still flying, and I won't use his name, but we were going to Venezuela on the Airbus, and he was the purser. I was the number 5. In the Airbus, we work in first class, and there was this elderly lady. She just was. Yeah, had not been back to Caracas in a very long time, and let's just say she was irate, and she was like she could be your grandmother. So the number 1 flight attendant, I think he was on some sort of medication or something. I mean, she was being rude to him, and she was pointing her finger at him, but she was being rude. But it wasn't that she was being a nasty person; she was just emotional. She had not been back to Venezuela in a long time, so she's starting to point his finger at, or she's pointing his finger at, I'm trying not to say his name.
Yeah.
And back then, do you remember we had those metal tins? You remember those
Which
metal?
one?
They were like in first class, you would serve the metal tray.
Oh yeah, it's kind of like the cafeteria tin that had the sections in. Yeah.
You've been here long enough, you know that.
Yeah.
You've been, they were metal.
The mess
So
hall
he's like,
tins, man. Yeah.
he lifts up that tray. He's like, I feel like hitting her with this. And I'm looking at him like, are you crazy? So that she just jumps up on the seat and starts yelling in Spanish. And there's other passengers that witness him saying that. So I mean, I had to diffuse the situation because he wanted to go to the captain, wanted to go and tell the captain to turn back to Miami because of this passenger.
Yeah.
But you just threatened to hit her with a metal tray.
Yeah.
So, it's just having to diffuse that whole situation. As a pilot, there's always a situation as a pilot. I would say as a pilot flying with there are certain individuals we fly with, certain captains, and some of the captains probably feel the same way about some of the FOs that are very difficult. And some people are just difficult because they want to be difficult.
Yeah.
And what I mean by that is if you're a flow through, they immediately don't like you. I'm not saying it's everyone. I know you experienced this. There are some.
Yeah.
Everyone has a right to their opinion. But the way I look at it is, I'm going to challenge you because granted, I'm a flow through, but my history is a lot more than what you've flown. And I'm very careful on how I word that.
Yeah.
And the reason I say that is because I've heard words from, oh, you're just a new kid on the block. That's because I'm probably like a couple of years younger.
Yeah.
I mean, just because you look.
Yeah, you gotta know your audience. Number 1 rule
you have
of
to know your audience.
You're in a confined space with a coworker. You're in a phone booth and you're performing a very highly functioning, highly educated, and highly procedural job. Know your audience, because if you don't know your audience, you're gonna put your foot in your mouth. Yeah. And I've learned that the hard way.
Your audience.
I've put my foot in my mouth plenty of times. I'll be the first to admit it. And I've learned from those situations. And I like to think that now you can put me in most situations, and in most situations with conflicting personalities or not, I'm going to be able to handle myself because I remember, get to know your audience before you open your mouth. And yeah, like you said, if you don't and you open your mouth, you just make a fool out of yourself. And a lot of people do that. Doesn't matter what seat they're in.
I'm sure I know you've experienced this too. Oh, you're just a new hire. You're just in your first year. Let me pay the bill. And I'm like, it's so condescending because it's like, oh, I got this. You're broke. I'm like, bitch, you don't know. I was like, fool. Take the bitch out. I was like, fool, you don't know people's backgrounds. I mean,
right.
It's nice. It's different if it comes. Everything is on what you say. Know your audience, how you say it. But when it's said in such a way that's so condescending, you're like,
yeah,
you.
That's when I go,
I know
okay,
you're
fine.
you could delete that.
Nah, it's fine. We'll figure it out. I'll put some sound effect in there.
I mean, we're characters too as FOs. I mean, we have a lot of interesting characters. We have a lot
Yeah.
of different personalities. We're all different. We're not the same. We all have different beliefs. Um, I fly with people that speak about the women or people's sexual preference, and it's interesting with all this training that we have in this company and how I think that it's a lot of it is just bullshit. I think that a
Yeah.
lot of people are doing what they have to do and say what they have to say, but
Yeah. It all
deep
comes
down in
down to
their mind,
two things, and something that actually my wife taught me 20 plus years ago. And it all comes down to fear and love. Every
fear
emotion
and
that
love.
you feel, it's either going to be a root is going to be in fear or it's going to be love. And all that
Right.
negativity and stereotyping and people what they fear it. They don't know it. They fear it, and so they're going to talk shit about it or talk down about it or sometimes not even realizing it. And it's a shame. And unfortunately, that's the society we live in globally, not just in the US. Well, a couple more questions and we'll wrap it up. I know it's getting kind of late for you over there on the East Coast.
I'm probably going to watch a little bit more of Ozark.
There you go. There you go.
Man, I can't get to bed early enough.
Yeah, oh, Jason Bateman. Forget about it. So, what
Jason
advice,
Bateman.
and you're probably the most qualified person I've had on the show thus far to answer this question. What advice would you give a young aviator just starting out in the industry right now?
I would say get involved. Don't just if you're becoming, well, how are you asking that question? A young aviator as just a pilot,
Yeah.
or
Or a young
okay,
person thinking
all
that
right,
they want to pursue a career in aviation, be it airline, corporate,
okay,
private,
gotcha.
cargo, whatever.
I would say don't just label yourself to one position. I would say get involved. If you're a pilot, get involved with the union if you choose to, or get involved with different organizations that the company has to offer. Um, you know, with the union, you have the Wings program. We talked about the Wingman. Wings and Wingman are two different things. The Wingman program. Get involved with Aeromedical. Get involved with professional standards. Put your name out for recruitment. You never know. There's also the cadet program. Um, get involved with volunteering with the different organizations that they have walk. They have the walks like the MS walk or the breast cancer walk or the aircraft pool. I did that with we were the screaming chickens at the regional.
Yeah.
That's what we were called, pushing that damn airplane. Um, but I would say get involved. Don't just fly a plane. I think it's important that you use your experience that you have prior to becoming an aviator. And experience is not just flying an airplane. Experience is also, I believe, volunteering and giving back.
Yeah.
That's what I would say.
And
Move
so,
around, decide what you want to do 10 years from now, even if you don't do it. Have goals. Are you going to just fly a plane for the rest of your life? I mean, you have your podcast. Check you out. And it doesn't mean just in your professional life, also in your personal life, because you and I both know whether you're a pilot or a flight attendant or any aviator, it's very easy to just get stuck into a routine and not get involved with anything else.
yeah, you get
You just come
comfortable.
home, watch TV, family,
Yeah.
get comfortable, and that's it.
Yeah.
I mean, this is amazing with your podcast. It's awesome.
Well, thank you. And this segues us into my next question perfectly. Where do you see yourself in the next 10 years?
Duck- just kidding. No way.
Run it, buddy. Run it. You got my support.
You know what? I think that about 10 years ago, um, I'd probably have to have a master's degree. I ain't going back to school. So at least not now. 10 years ago, I probably would have thought, that I would want to pursue a management position aggressively. So to answer your question, where do I want to be 10 years from now? If I could be influential and if I could be a not just a motivator, but if I could be a if I could be an individual that someone can look up to, a mentor, then
Buddy, you
that's enough
already
for
are.
me.
I
Yeah, but
mean,
that's
I'm not
enough for
blowing
me.
sunshine here. This is you already are. Anyone
Yeah.
that just Googles your name, come on.
Have you been Googling my name? It's funny you say that. Someone said to me a couple of weeks ago, I Googled your name. I was like, what? Do I come out in there?
You should
You
always
know,
Google
you,
yourself and put on Google alerts in case somebody posts something
I
about you.
should
I
have
mean,
done.
come on, this is the world we live in. You can keep up or you
Yeah.
can get run over. That's it.
Did you find out that that was in jail? No, no, no. I consider myself to someday possibly be in management.
Yeah.
That could change tomorrow.
Yeah.
The management, going into management is something that I go back and forth with, for the simple fact is, um, I'm not sure that I want to put myself in a position where I want to work that hard and not be compensated
Yeah.
the way that I should be compensated.
Yeah.
And and there's reasons why I say that. It goes back to losing my spouse, um, and had a very high level position at Xerox. So I although they were compensated extremely well, the work is very stressful.
Mm,
And the question is, at the end of the day, is that worth it?
yeah.
Especially when it takes away free time.
Right.
But maybe in management,
Yeah.
maybe in management. Who knows? We'll see.
Yeah, we will.
I
And
go
trust
back and
me,
forth on that. I go on that one.
I'll be
You'll be a
keeping an eye
manager
on
for
it.
me. You're gonna be chief pilot.
I was the assistant chief for 4 months in LA for Sandpiper before they shut the
See?
base. And it was an experience that
See?
really paved the way for me to not ever do that again. Because I was, what I saw in those 4 months, I mean, it was a drop in the bucket in terms of time, but I really opened my eyes to, pardon me to say it, but the bullshit that the employees put those chiefs through on a daily basis. I mean,
Yes.
you're getting it from every end. You're getting from the higher ups going, hey, you got to cut, hours and, delays and this and that. And then you get it from the bottom guys going, oh, they screwed up my schedule. And this flight attendant said this to me, or this pilot said this, or my captain told me I was a, and it's just a headache. And, I've got a lot of respect for chief pilots now. And I think at the legacy carrier, we have some of the most amazing individuals
do.
that sit in that seat. And I have the utmost respect for them, not just because of the seat that they occupy, but because I've had that experience for that very short period of time before they closed the base after the bankruptcy that Legacy went through. I've got a lot of respect for it, and so.
What makes a good chief pilot, as well as I feel a good manager, and this is just an opinion, you have to be able to sympathize and empathize with everyone's position and what they do. Most of our chief pilots, as well as, I'm not going to say most of them. Most managers and some chief pilots can sympathize and empathize, but I've actually lived those positions, so
Yeah.
I can understand a lot more.
Yeah. Yeah.
So if I was to do that someday, you never know. I can actually say I completely know what you're going through, and I know what you understand. I understand you completely.
Yeah. Your experience defines you. It really does, especially if you pay attention. Just look around. Just got to keep your eyes open, My final 2 questions are some of my favorites. If you can go back in time just for a moment and whisper something in the ear of your younger self, what would you tell yourself?
I would say it's time for you to begin your flying career and not wait. And that means becoming a pilot at a younger age.
Hmm.
That's what I would have whispered to my younger self. And although I had all these various departments and experiences, I was going to a different route. My route was more management back then. And if I had to do it over again, I would have said I would learn to fly at a younger age. However, that being said, I still probably would have gotten involved in knowing who I am with the Welcome Out program, and I would have worked a different. I would have gone to the different departments, even if I had to work for a day or two. I would have volunteered. I would have done it.
Yeah.
Some people, a friend of mine, I mentioned that to someone recently, and he said, "Would you have done that?" I said,
Yeah.
"Yeah. I mean, I volunteer. I will always volunteer. I'll always give back. I think that's important. But yeah, I would have."
Yeah. And finally, I would like to just have you think of one person, just one from your past that has made the greatest impact to your success and your career and your life. Who would that person be and why them?
Oh, that's a touchy question. Oh my gosh. I'm going to say my mother. My mother was a fighter. My mother, the way she raised us to volunteer. She raised us to give back. She raised us to be considerate, and she raised us strong. And no matter what comes your way, you never, you just keep going. You don't let anybody stop you from accomplishing anything.
I just want to take a moment and say thank you for sharing your journey with us today. You are absolutely an inspiration to me, and I am truly grateful to have this opportunity to share this time with you. I hope that you found this kind of journey in podcasting and the interview process pleasing and kind of exciting and interesting, and this is I've been doing this now since October, and
Oh wow, wow, wow.
not a very long time, and it's as it's growing, I am really just enjoying hearing these stories and the journeys of these aviators and how unique each one is. And yours has been just amazing. All the effort that you've put in to give back to your community, to your fellow pilot, your fellow man or woman, to be involved in all of these programs with the children and in HIMS and in recruitment. I mean, I can't wait to see what you do next. Really.
Hmm. You don't want to know what I answer to people when I tell them if I don't fly. So, yeah, I appreciate that, and I appreciate you taking the time. I appreciate you doing this podcast. I think it's important for future as well as past and current general aviators to see people's past, what people have done, what they've done in their career, how they've grown, and I appreciate you taking the time, taking your time to do it. Um, Thank you.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, and before we wrap it up today, I wanted to give you an opportunity to tell us all some exciting news. This morning, you were interviewed by a sister company here of Legacy Airlines, and a journalist for that sister company contacted you for a rag that you could find on your next flight called American Way magazine. Can you tell us a little bit about your experience?
It was a positive experience. We had a conversation that I thought was going to be rather short, but we spoke for quite some time on my journey, as well as I was able to provide some of my photos throughout my 29 years within the company, and some military photos. And it was actually a fun, rewarding experience. And granted, they're using the month of June or July to do this. Um, I find it interesting because we don't really have people traveling as much. But
Well, maybe by
it
June
was
and
an
July.
honor. It was,
Yeah.
yeah, we will. It was an honor. It was a great experience, and I thanked her for them to even consider me. You know, I don't do things to be recognized. I do things because I like to do them, and I kind of told her that I don't need to be recognized, but I enjoy to do them. My mother never was like that. My father wasn't. They always gave back as much as they could, and that's what I told her. I don't need to be recognized, but it's nice.
And I can't think of a better
Yeah.
person to be interviewed for that magazine. And I will definitely be checking that out here. Either the June or July issue is what they're telling you. So for those listeners,
Yeah.
I'll put a link in the show notes to keep an eye out. If you remember to go back to the website, you can find it at AmericanWay.com, and you can download articles from the American Way magazine. Better yet, the next time you fly Legacy Airlines. And if you don't, fly our sister company, American. So with that said, again, thank you, Owen, for taking the time to sit down with this grateful aviator to talk about your journey and the amazing stepping points and strategies that you've taken along the way to get to the position you are now. And, you know, with all this COVID-19 and world economic crisis that we're in, it's very refreshing to hear about your journey. And again, thank you.
And thank you. I appreciate that.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, that wraps up episode 39 of Squawk Ident. Wow, 39 episodes. It's been an amazing journey. Absolutely. And I'd like to take this opportunity and again thank Owen Cotto for sitting down with us and taking us along on his journey in aviation. And what a journey it's been. Are you enjoying Squawk Ident? We sincerely hope so. Please visit our website at www.aviatortony.com, and there you can check out episode cover art, episode archives, you can check out photos from the flight line, and even from the Aviator Sound Studios. There's a cool pilot shop where you can get cool Squawk Ident gear, and you can leave comments and audio feedback as well. And new to the Squawk Ident family of marketing, we now have a YouTube channel. Just look up Aviator Tony and Squawk Ident Podcast. There you can find short clips and videos from the show. You can also contribute to the show and help us out with equipment and marketing expenses by becoming a producer of Squawk Ident, either with a one-time or a recurrent contribution. Facebook and Instagram users can search Squawk Ident Podcast, and on Twitter, users can search Aviator Tony and Squawk Ident to follow on the socials. If you're listening on Apple Podcasts, remember to write us a review and help us out with our Apple Podcast ratings. And as always, I'd like to thank you for taking the time to listen to this grateful aviator. Keep the dirty side down, be safe, and take care of each other.